when we start to observe our own brains as we enter adolescence, there's a lot of tracks that are in place that we didn't necessarily choose to have where they are. They are just like cattle paths that they talk about in England, where that's just where the cows went, that's where we started walking, that's where the road put. Now we have a chance to remodel. And so thought sequencing is when you take your train track strips and you go to the library, if you will, and you pick which strips you want in your brain. An adult is going to be more familiar with the menu of options. So sometimes with a teenager, you have to help them formulate thoughts. Now, moms, a little hint on how to work with boys. Instead of telling them the thoughts you want them to put on their track, propose an exaggerated opposite. I know it's a little silly to do this with boy brains, but they need to have the confidence that they came up with it themselves. They find it faster if you give them an opposite, and they find it even faster if it's an exaggerated opposite. I use my, my camouflaged satanic therapist voice tone. Okay, so I'll sound like a therapist, but I'll be saying something absolutely satanic to help them try to catch it in practice. And I'll say, let's see, in this circumstance, how about we have the thought, you're a complete loser and you have no friends. How about we put that in? And they're like, are you stupid? That's the... And I'm all, no, it's a good one. Like, you'll really feel cruddy about yourself. And no. So I get the reaction I want. Okay, I want them to be a little defensive and protective. And I'll say, well, then what do you want instead? And they will automatically think of the opposite. I'm smart and I'm capable and people like me. Oh, okay, great idea that you just came up with. Let's write that down as your next thought. All right, the next one is, how about this problem's overwhelming and you're not smart enough to find a solution? So again, they're fighting against it. And I'm all, what, you don't like that one? Like, no. I said, well, then what would you pick? I am smart and I can find a solution. All right, look what you came up with. Look what you came up with. So they don't know that I'm guiding the process, because if you give them, they're not going to feel ownership over it. If you just hand them the correct thoughts to have, they don't really want to just be a replication of what their mother wants them to think. They're trying to formulate their own thoughts. And then thought sequencing, so I will teach them, put them on 3x5 cards, just like tracks of a train. And then now we're going to practice them. Now you, as an adult, can do this in your head a lot easier. But a lot of the adults I work with, let's write them all down, put them in the order, let's move them around. Okay, let's move this 3x5 card in front of that 3x5 card. Again, we do this in great detail in Eternal Warriors 3.0. We walk through all these steps in very careful detail, and then we practice them, and then we go, wait, I'm missing one. I need a thought in between these two to bridge from here to here. These are out of order, and you might have 20 thoughts in a row that they start practicing like the notes on a piano. And it starts being really slow, and then they get faster and faster and faster and faster. In the same way that thoughts can trigger you into an unwanted chemical reaction, you need to include inside of there thoughts that will cause the warrior / we're going to come back and win the football game psychology. We got this, we can do this, we are heroes, for their lives, for their wives, for their children, like dragons did they fight. So that is a single phrase that is designed to trigger a positive, uplifting, edifying chemical reaction on purpose. What a lot of the scientists don't include is intentional brain chemistry manipulation of yourself. Because your flagpole is not just a physical destination, it is a mindset. So for me in particular, with my sports background, I do a lot of stuff with the term the zone. And so I know what I'm going for. I know what I'm trying to achieve. So my flagpole is to be in the zone. And so for me, it used to be an athletic mindset where I can tear people's limbs off. Okay, I was a wrestler. That was my main sport. Then as a missionary, I studied the concept of having the spirit present. So that was how do I get the spirit present during when I'm teaching? And now there's a couple of features I need. One, I have very little natural empathy. I have to really work at experiencing enough empathy that I can actually be with someone psychologically. So that's a sign that I'm in the right zone. Charity is not natural for me. I have to really work hard to feel charitable. And one of the first things that leaves my brain is creativity. So I can tell I'm out of the zone when I'm being reactive, or I'm being like mundane, or like it's the same idea as I had. I'm trying to do a square peg into a round hole with a person sitting in front of me instead of customizing it. I got to be more creative. So knowing for yourself your features that represent that you're in your highest brain, and the first ones that leave your brain when you start to drift out of the zone: impatient, irritated, frustrated, overwhelmed, scared. Then the alarms go off and I get back to zero. So there's an exercise we do here where we get pulled off course and we recenter. We get pulled off course and we recenter. We have a weekly ritual, but I'm learning that it has to be done at least daily to get zeroed out, is the term we call it in Meta Moroni. Have you zeroed out today? Have you zeroed out today? So the manpower rituals are supposed to zero somebody out if they're done correctly. Did your prayer help you zero out, or do you need to change the way you pray? Did your reading help you zero out, or do you have to change the way you read? Did your journaling zero you out, or do you have to change the way you journal? Did you ministering help you zero out, or do you have to change the way you minister?
If you're finding this video helpful or want to help us reach others in need, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because it really supports our channel. Thank you.
Now again, moms, I want to remind you, it was never intended for you to be a specialist in all these areas any more than you would be a pediatrician or a dentist, okay, or a football coach. It was never intended for you to be a specialist in the area. It's nice that you're aware, like you're aware of stuff about teeth, so you know, okay, this is a dental issue, this is a pediatrician issue, this is a sports issue. So don't expect yourself to become a specialist in all this. Most of the young men that you're going to be working with are transitioning or starting their transition into becoming adult men. One of the most important psychological accomplishments for these young men in preparation to take on a wife is they must prove to themselves that they don't need a mom anymore. If you've never been a young man, you don't know that there's a rule. You can't have a wife as long as you need a mom. The textbooks call this the individuation process. The goal of the brain, and it's true for some young women as well, not all of them, but for almost every young man, I have to demonstrate that I don't need my mom to mother me anymore. Some of them have a very intense drive for this. So once your son starts to show this anti-mom interaction style, it's really easy it takes some practice to switch your interaction style and let him practice being the specialist of his own brain. Let me give an example of how that's done. As soon as you feel that resistance of him going, I just want to demonstrate that I don't need you to mother me anymore, you can start almost every sentence with, you know what, son, I've never been a teenage boy before. Now, it's really nice because it reminds you that you've never been a teenage boy before also. And then you take the circumstance you're dealing with and you say, can you please explain to me how you're going to learn how to do this as a man, how you're going to apply this. So specifically, I've never been a young man before. I don't know what it feels like to be at a level 0 on the chemical scale for a boy. I don't know what it feels like to be at a level 1. I don't know what happens in your brain when you're at level 2. Can you please explain that to me because I don't get it? Now, what you're doing is you're instantly not being the authority on the subject, so he can now be the authority. Now, we don't like to be dumb, so we can go, well, I don't know, but I'll figure it out. So if he says, I don't know, you just go, would you mind studying that and figuring it out and then explain it to me? But as soon as you start explaining it to him, you've just reversed the process and sabotaged his man development. There's a lot of space here. There's a lot of young men who had mothers who died before they were teenagers and had to figure all this stuff out themselves. Their brains are completely capable of figuring it all out without you being their primary educator. But when you give them an invitation to kind of like when, I know this one seems silly, but it's very good for human development. When a teenage girl asked the quarterback of the football team how he became so good at football, him explaining how he became good at football is good for his head. Anytime a person, and this is true for most young women as well, but for a young man to brag about how he did something will reinforce it in his brain. It'll get stronger in his brain. Every time you talk to him as if he doesn't understand it, it will sabotage his development. If he asks you for information, that's different. Mom, can you teach me how to do my own laundry? Mom, can you show me how to cook lasagna? Mom, can you do this? And then you only give him like 3/4 of it until he asks for more, so he owns his educational process. Remember, in the meantime, God is fully capable of handling the flaws of a human developing man. He's been doing it for thousands of years. Okay, so the compensation system of the atonement is quite powerful. So don't panic over your son's developmental issues. Even God understands masculine sexual self-mastery development. Okay, there's no 16-year-old who's going to go to hell because he hasn't learned how to control his sexuality yet. He'll keep practicing and learning, keep practicing, keep learning. If they can have full mastery of it by the time they're 18, 19, or 20, that's statistically unlikely and a miracle. So let's remember what they're up against. There's another important article called Why Do Kids Turn Out the Way They Do? Why did Sariah raise 2 sons to be murderers? Can you imagine a Relief Society lesson? Now, ladies, we have something very important to learn from Sariah and from Eve. If they just would have had one more family home evening, then Cain would not have killed Abel, and Laman and Lemuel would not have been so difficult. Let's discuss how it's the mother's fault, because everybody knows that if your kids are struggling with anything, it's your fault. Now, do we all feel edified? I did some research once on amazing people who came from broken homes. Do you know how many people became phenomenal contributors to the world after coming from not so great parents. So all you have to do is be better than an alcoholic mom, and you can have a son like Abraham Lincoln. How easy it is? Just ask you, am I better than an alcoholic mom? Now you're good enough to have an Abraham Lincoln as a son, because that's what he was raised by. Actually, he wasn't raised by her. She didn't stick around very long.